concessions, do you think, been sufficient to get some common ground between the two sides?
Mean the increasing of wages and things like that?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yes, I think that's an attempt by the regime, as it's done for many years, to divide any amount of protest against it to hold itself into power. And so I think we'll see more of these moves by the government in the coming days and weeks.
Do you think it's sufficient, though? What kind of traction do you think these youths in Tahrir Square really have in terms of political power?
Well, I think going forward, it's going to be very tough because the euphoria that they've had and carried on remarkably up until this point is inevitably going to dwindle a little bit as people need to get back to jobs and homes and welfare. However, I think you have to see very clearly how the power of these executive authorities in Egypt has been curbed by this less than 2 weeks of demonstrations that are ongoing today by the folks in Tahrir Square.
And what is your assessment of the talks that have been held with opposition groups, including the Muslim Brotherhood? Do you think that they can reach a deal that the people in the streets are going to be happy with?
It seems to me right now that there are two different divergent goals coming out of the protest camp. The first is the removal of President Mubarak from presidential leadership, and the second is reform of President Mubarak's regime. I don't really think that you can have regime reform, at least the track record of the last 30 years of President Mubarak's rule, without the removal of President Mubarak from executive authority. But I think that's going to be the two goals that are going to be pushed forward from now. I don't think, therefore, that any kind of talk of reform from these different political groups is going to lead to the lasting reform that the protesters are seeking while President Mubarak is still in executive authority.
To what extent do you think the U.S. administration is managing the situation? There have been intense talks, of course, behind the scenes.
Yes, I think the U.S. administration is not clear about its public statements. It may be in private clear about what its policy is, but I think in public statements it's not clear. I think as well there's a growing gap between the values that the Obama administration says the United States government favors and the activities or policies that they actually support. And I think that gap is going to widen. I'm concerned from the past experience that unless the United States foreign policy brings those two divergent gaps together, that is, matches their rhetorical values with their policies that they support, they're going to face some real problems in the future with aligning a foreign policy with the new government of Egypt. And there will be a new government of Egypt at some point.
Is it just a gap, a credibility gap, or is it, in fact, a complete U-turn from the time when President Obama spoke at Cairo University and spoke about a new era between the U.S. and the Arab world?
Well, I think you're right. In June 2009, when President Obama gave that historic speech in Cairo University, there was some real thought going into the idea that this was an engagement policy in a new way with different Muslim communities around the world. I think, though, quickly after that, a lot of commentators from different parts of the Arab world, different parts of the Muslim world, have really noted that there has not been a follow-up in terms of backing policies with rhetoric. And I think we see that on play today in Egypt. Frankly, I think the incremental reforms that the Mubarak administration seems to be backing now in Egypt are not, I do not believe, going to resolve this situation. If those reforms were going to solve the situation, I don't think you would have seen the protesters in the streets from 25 January onwards.
Thank you very much indeed. Live from Boston, Paul Barron, Director of Harvard University's Center for Middle Eastern Studies. Southern Sudan is waking up to the prospect of becoming the world's newest nation. Official results confirmed almost 99% of voters in favor of going it alone. Independence comes into effect in July, and as Harry Mutasa reports, concerns remain about the future.
Euphoria as people get confirmation that Southern Sudan will become the world's newest nation. Many have waited years for independence. As expected, the number of those who voted for secession was overwhelming.
Those who voted for secession, 98.83% of the total valid votes.
President Omar al-Bashir accepted the final results, allaying fears of some he would not let the South go peacefully.
We accept the results and we will not question them. Absolutely. We respect the Southerners' rights to choose what they want.
And people here seem confident officials in southern Sudan will take the new country in the right direction.
They have the abilities and the capacity to lead the country to developing and also to a better future.
Monday's announcement has given southern Sudan international recognition. Organizations like the African Union, the Arab League and the European Union have given their support to the South and promised to develop the new country. But expectations here are high, and building a new nation will not be easy. A lot of work needs to be concluded before Independence Day on the 9th of July. Issues including the disputed border region of IBA, citizenship, border demarcation and oil sharing are some of the challenges. As Southerners here celebrate the birth of a new nation, resolving outstanding issues will determine how peaceful the transition to independence will be. Harun Matasa, Al Jazeera, Juba, Southern Sudan.
Keith Jennings is a specialist on Sudan. He's also the Regional Director for Southern and East Africa at the National Democratic Institute and joins us live from Washington. Your reaction then, Keith Jennings, on this day when those overwhelming election results are confirmed?
Well, I think first it's very important for us to congratulate the people of Southern Sudan who've exercised their right to self-determination, but to all of the Sudanese people, because this is indeed a very historic development, and it's something that's quite important for the future of democracy for the entire continent of Africa.
There are, though, some human rights groups who are worried that Omar al-Bashir, the president of Sudan, should be congratulated, rewarded. Should it go that far, do you think?
Yes, I think it's very important that we put it in its proper context. If this referendum had not been successful, we could have had a resumption of war in a place where more than 1.5 million people have been killed over a 20-year period. And so I think I understand the human rights concerns. I'm a human rights activist myself, and the issue of the ICC arrest warrant is very important. The context of the referendum, though, takes place within the comprehensive peace agreement that was agreed to as bringing an end to a war that had gone on for far too long and cost the lives and ruin of a big part of the country. So as we move forward, there are a lot of serious issues that still remain to be worked out. That includes IBA, as the segment just before me pointed out, popular consultations in southern Kordofan and Blue Nile, issues of the status of Southerners living in the north, citizenship issues, currency and revenue sharing.
All right, so you seem to suggest
number.
then that President Bashir's congratulatory words that we heard also in that same report may not be taken at face value. Are you worried that there might be some kind of sabotage or interference between now and when those very important issues are resolved?
No, to the contrary. I'm saying that the acceptance of the results by President Bashir is very important. It's a signal that there can be mutually respectful relations in the future between the North and the South. And had he not played the role he's played more recently, it is possible that there could have been a resumption of war.
So what are the
but
source of your worries?
Well, the source of my worries are recent developments that have taken place. The right of people to peaceful assembly, to political expression, those rights, the rule of law and human rights and other fundamental freedoms should be respected. But going forward, I think that the relationships between the North and the South is very important. They need each other. And quite frankly, the African continent, the African Union, the United States, the European Union, all have accepted the results that have been presented here today. And when 98.3% of the people vote, they intend to let the world know that their right to self-determination is very important to them.
And finally, Keith Jennings, I'm curious to hear what your assessment is of the youth protest movements in Tunisia and Egypt's impact in Sudan? Because there were demonstrations, weren't there, in Khartoum, and students were beaten and killed.
Yes, there were. I think that the basis of this is similar to the austerity measures that have been introduced in the north and even in the south, the increases in food prices, cooking oil, the basic necessities. The reaction is in response to that. There are also other